welcome back. Today we are going to review a book while I also am holding one of my snakes. I just had this silly idea for this because the book that we're going to talk about is called The Snakes. And since I have many snakes really, but one that would do well to hold in a video, and I haven't featured any of my snakes in a long time in a video, here we are. This is Mo. He's a ball python. His morph is called a Super Mojave. And yeah, so just in case you were wondering about any of that, he's not full grown yet, but he is growing real well. He's very much a growing big boy, and I love him. But he's not why we're really here. We're here to talk about the book, The Snakes. So I picked this book up partly for the title and because I have snakes. But also, like, reading the description of it, it sounded very fun. It's about this couple who are going on a holiday, and then they go to the wife's brother's hotel that he manages, and there's snakes in the attic, and that's about all that the background of the book gives you. And so I was like, oh, this will be fun. It'll be like someone who keeps snakes, has them as like pets or something, and they live up in the attic or the basement or whatever. I don't remember if it said the location, but it ended up being the attic. But then what the book actually turned into was more of like a thriller / murder mystery, and the snakes themselves were honestly not super relevant to the story. So, I mean, in some ways, even more worthy to have added my own snake in this video, because he's about as relevant to this video as the snakes are relevant to the title of this book. Obviously, there were snakes in the book, but I thought it was going to be some, like, big discovery, how, like, people are scared of snakes or something, and then they meet the brother snakes, and they're like, oh, snakes are actually kind of cool. They can be really interesting pets or whatever. And that's just not the direction the story went. That it turned into, like, a murder mystery / thriller was an interesting choice, I felt, and not really what I wanted when I picked up the book. But that's how it goes sometimes. You don't always get what you're expecting with books. So, or what sort of seems like is advertised on a book. Also, I will say that the ending of this book was a little dark for my taste. It's definitely not a super happy ending. I don't necessarily want to spoil things if you are interested in reading this book. But yeah, it's not a happy ending. So there's also that. If you're looking for something to read, you'll want to keep that in mind. But yeah, I did overall enjoy the story. It did feel paced pretty well overall, and the writing style was pretty fun and interesting, and I enjoyed that. So there you go. Just kind of some basics. There were a few little elements that I could mention. The husband in the story is biracial. He's white and black, which is great. We love representation and whatnot, but I will say that I kind of forgot several times in the story, and then it would be brought up, like, during a police investigation or something. They'd be asking very pointed, like, a black person questions, like, how were you raised? Did you participate in gangs? Things like that. And then I'd be like, oh yeah, he's a black guy. And I don't know if that's a fault of me as a reader, or a little bit in the writer's fault, but that was one thing that I noticed. That kind of bothered me. It was also a really interesting perspective for a story, I felt like. The wife of the story comes from a very rich family. Her father's in, like, property or something that involves money that way. But she's, like, rejected that completely and doesn't get along with her family because of it, and she just kind of renounced it, and she'd let her husband know that yes, she was from money, but that she wasn't taking money from them, all that kind of thing. And that kind of causes some conflicts throughout the story, too. So yeah, just a really interesting story. Definitely some interesting perspectives that I haven't really read before. And even though they weren't heavily featured, it did have snakes in it, which I find fun. And it was nice, too, because even though they weren't like pet snakes or something, they weren't super villainized as snakes. It did reference that oftentimes people don't like snakes, but it wasn't like a, oh no, snakes are so scary and awful, we have to go kill them. It featured a little bit in it because her brother did say that he was like trying to trap and kill the snakes that were in his attic, but it wasn't like a major focus that everyone was that freaked out by the snakes. There was one scene where the wife wakes up after falling asleep in the garden and she finds a snake on her, and that ended fine. It wasn't like she freaked out and had someone go kill the snake. She just like freaked out like, oh my gosh, I woke up with a snake on me, and then she got out of the situation and left the snake alone. So I appreciate that perspective, that it wasn't like snakes are super awful, terrible things and we should all kill them. I'm glad that, you know, mostly that perspective wasn't there. Because look at these little guys, they're so cute. To be fair, Mo is not at all like the kind of snakes that they would have had, because the book took place in France, and I believe they said that they were like brown snakes that were up in the attic. So ball pythons are a little far away from that, because they're from Africa, and also Mo being a morph and bred specifically to look like this, and not even like a wild ball python, a little different too. But yeah, just thought it would be kind of fun to, you know, look into it from that perspective and be like, here's what snakes are like too. But yeah, so if you happen to have read this and have any thoughts on it, feel free to share those down below. If you happen to have any pet snakes, feel free to tell me about them down below, because I'd love to hear stories about other people's snakes. If you want more videos of me doing reviews with snakes like little Mo here, I think that could be arranged, because this was a lot of fun to just have him crawling around too. And yeah, I think that's all I've got for now. This is the Umlaut Herper signing out.